I got off work at around 8 p.m. and headed over to my friend's house, where we decided to try snorting some DMT because we had read that the trip lasts longer and is more mellow. I had already vaporized DMT numerous times and broken through, or blasted off many times, mostly positive experiences with one trip that was terrifying, but not as specific as what I would encounter this night, and wanted a different experience, so we went for it. And man, I can tell you that it was not at all worth it. The burn and nasal drip was so relentless that it felt as though I had snorted hot sauce. It just would not go away. My friend and I got some very mild visuals while looking at a tapestry on his wall, but overall were disappointed with the experience and went out for a walk and a cigarette. I can safely say I'll never try that method of ingesting DMT again. Upset with the outcome of snorting the DMT, after about 40 minutes or so we decided to just vaporize it how we always had. I loaded up a normal amount for a lighter breakthrough, 40 to 60 milligrams, heated up my nail, and set some mood lighting in my friend's room. We decided not to play music for this trip, for whatever reason. Normally we play some kind of relaxed electronic music or jam band stuff, but wanted to see where our minds would take us if left only to themselves with minimal exterior influences or stimuli. I went into the DMT realm that I had been familiar with for some time now due to previous experiences. I closed my eyes and saw a dark brown tree with female elf characters posing around it, vines entangling them with the trunk, like a painting or tapestry. The elves were facing away from the tree, which seemed to be breathing or moving in some way. These characters slowly started to move towards me and around the DMT space that my consciousness was fully occupying. They began to transform into jester-like characters, dancing and laughing and getting close to me. Several times I thought they were people that I knew. Everyone I knew and loved. Then my friend somehow unbeknownst to me was able to stand up and let his dog into the room. At this point I couldn't move and have no idea how he accomplished this. When this happened, his dog jumped onto the bed and started to try to play with us. To me this felt like a million of these jester-like creatures all pouring into the room at once, dancing with each other and welcoming me. The light from hallway was like a flood of feelings of excitement and anxiety, and with all of these gestures dancing around, became a bit overwhelming, so I opened my eyes. Upon opening my eyes, I realized that I was still laying on my friend's bed still and looked at the tapestry in front of us that we looked at in our previous, painful, and unsuccessful trip. It was a multicolored assortment of mandalas with black circles at the center. It made me feel uneasy, so I closed my eyes again to be greeted by the elves. Only this time they weren't happy to see me. They contorted and all began moving towards me slowly. I looked away into what felt like a bottom right corner of whatever realm I was experiencing and saw one elf, naked, cold, and shivering in the void. He was squatting in the dark all alone and looked back over his shoulder at me with demonic eyes. I looked away, horrified only to find that all of the other elves now resembled this lone one. They got into my face and bared their sharp teeth at me. At this point, it was clear that they were demons who were not happy that I was in their realm, rather than sprightly jesters that were happy to see me. They began to remind me of every bad thing that I have ever done, witnessed, or thought of in my entire life, all at once. Even things that I didn't know or forgot had happened. My subconscious was being dumped out into my immediate consciousness, and I was not ready for it. It was too much to take, and I felt as if the world was dropping out beneath me. I didn't want to live. They continued reminding me over and over in their language of emotion just how hopeless, futile, and distraught the human race, and even more specifically, I was. That there was no point in any of this. That everything is, always has been, and always will be rot and decay. This terrified and depressed me so immensely that I wanted anything but it. Anything, please, anything but this. I pleaded to the universe. But it wouldn't matter, because this was all that was. All that ever has been. And all that ever would be. There was no escaping this horrific truth that lies deep inside of us. Or at least that's how I felt in the moment. I didn't want to live, I didn't want to die, and I didn't know what to do. I opened my eyes again to try to escape this hellish, demon-filled nightmare realm, only to find that the mandala in front of me and cold, lonely reality was just as bad. I felt that nothing was okay, ever had been, or ever would be again. I tried to tell myself that it was only the DMT that I had taken, but this didn't help. I closed my eyes again to just wait for the trip to pass, not knowing how much time had elapsed since my ingestion of the DMT. When I closed my eyes this time, I saw a floating skull, only it wasn't a human skull. It was deformed with an elongated and warped cranium and crooked, sharp, and unevenly sized and shaped teeth. It was writhing with millions of microscopic maggots. It had horrific, off-white, bat-like wings with many small tears in them and seemed to flash and move continuously like a very fast strobe light. I opened my eyes again trying to escape, and actually got some momentary relief from all of the horror. Stupidly, I then closed them again, hoping to return to a positive DMT space, only to see the same flying, maggot-writhing, deformed skull in greater detail. This one was too much, and I can't even try to, nor do I necessarily want to, try to explain it, so I opened my eyes and left them open, staring at the mandala in front of me in terror. I sat next to my friend, eyes wide with horror without saying a word for what felt like at least 5 or 10 minutes. Eventually, we went downstairs and outside for another cigarette, and he asked if I was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to even talk about what I had just experienced for a solid 15 to 20 minutes. I slowly was able to climb back into reality, but man, was that a horrible, terrifying experience. I started off by drinking some mushroom tea. I had infused exactly 1 gram of what I knew to be very potent mushrooms into the water, previously boiled. I really enjoyed drinking the mushroom tea. It's always so calming and meditative for me to just sit/lay down drinking the tea and clearing my mind before the journey. It feels sacred and reminiscent of something my ancestors did, very grounding for me. I drank the tea slowly, and when I finished it, I felt a little something already as it had been about 20 minutes. I then prepared a bowl of caapi leaves on top of weed for smoking. I went to the window and smoked these together. I smoked 3 bowls in succession because I knew that I needed a substantial amount of these caapi leaves, not extract, just plain leaves, to get a decent effect and to achieve potentiation of the trip. I definitely got the potentiation I was looking for. It was a relatively quick but still somewhat gradual ascent, and the difference was very noticeable. I felt like the come-up all happened at once after the effects of the caapi hit me. I felt dreamier and more blissful, as caapi seems to help bring about this peaceful effect. My open-eye visuals became particularly interesting, and I began to get a similar visual effect to many of the other times I've done mushrooms and/or DMT. This effect can be best described as something that happens when I look ahead of myself anywhere from 5 to 20 feet away. What happens is, wherever I'm looking, the empty space that my eyes are focused on develops into various shapes. It's as if the empty space appears as a type of clear plasma and then starts to get defined edges and proceeds to form into these shapes. Then, the shapes break apart and the small pieces come towards me on either side. As the pieces come towards me, sometimes they move in strange rigid, often symmetrical, patterns, and other times they messily tumble on over. But every time this happens, the pieces are on each side, right and left, of where I was originally looking. And they tumble over to me on either side above my head and then come down to the ground on either side of me. When they come down upon me, I can feel their energy sweep over me. Sometimes it almost feels like a light breeze. This happened countless times throughout the trip. In fact, from smoking the caapi on, I don't think this effect went away for the entire experience. Things felt very hyperspacey and alien yet familiar in a similar way to the DMT space. I kept losing myself in strange trains of thought that just spiraled deeper and deeper until words could not describe under any circumstances what these concepts were. Whenever I came out of the trance a bit and attempted to extract whatever it was I had just been thinking about, the thoughts would dissipate, almost as if they weren't compatible with the conscious part of my mind. In fact, sometimes the thoughts would even seem to disguise themselves as other thoughts that made more sense, but I would feel that these replacement thoughts didn't come close to the complexity or meaning of the original ones. I came to call the original thoughts inaccessible thoughts, because usually I can't access them from my conscious mind. These thoughts come to my mind often when using copy, and since this experience, when using copy other times, I have been able to extract a few of them by trying exceptionally hard to hold on to them and then write them down as best as I can. In this case, the thoughts have ended up translating to what seem to be premonitions of the future, various situations that seem plausible but have never actually happened. At least not yet. Anyway, I kept on smoking the copy and went into my room to trance out. I found that this level of blissfulness was hard to contain. I eagerly let go of myself and went back and forth between realities. I kept lapsing out of existence and returning home. So refreshing and just so right. There was no mistaking that this feeling was quite erotic as well, though not by a physical sense in the slightest. On the astral plane, various entities came to me and would give me advice and food for thought. Many of these issues are personal, but they had to do with various life choices, things that could or might happen in my life, and people in my life that I have met or would meet and change the course of my life forever. Although this astral plane was not by any means only inhabited by light forces, as opposed to dark ones, I will say that it felt perfectly crafted. It was exactly what it needed to be, and I accepted it completely and lovingly. Because I wasn't really attached to my ego, a lot of this banter between me and entities took place through abstract communications that seemed to be of a different nature or language. However, I could still decode and understand it because it coincided with the kinds of communications that my ego self can normally understand. These communications just had to be transmitted in alternate ways since my ego self was barely present. I can't put into words what these abstract communications were because they were just that, too abstract. Soon enough, I decided to put about 20 milligrams of DMT in the pipe between the copy leaves. This turned out to be a great idea. I felt no hesitation this time, as nearly every time before doing DMT, I become nervous even though I love it. The copy actually made me kind of crave the DMT, it seemed. I have heard of this happening to others as well with copy. The DMT just being, well, yummy, for lack of a better adjective. After having the DMT, I felt super trancy and wanted to close my eyes, but oddly enough, I felt that some sort of entity was telling me to keep them open. I don't know why this is. When I closed my eyes, I saw nothing, but when I kept my eyes open, the entire room was transformed and there were beings inside every piece of furniture, every empty space, every wall. I could feel the personalities of each being. It was out of this world and amazing. Sometimes the bliss would overcome me and I would start to close my eyes, but then a conceptual voice or entity would alert me and tell me to keep my eyes open and pay attention to what was happening in the room. My intention of this experience had been to take in my surroundings and appreciate them, because I would be moving soon and I wanted to reflect on the times I had spent at this location, so maybe this was just a way for me to fulfill my original intention. Because this is a new house, nobody has lived in it before its current inhabitants, including me. Otherwise, perhaps I would have felt the energies of previous inhabitants and relived foreign memories. I felt as if I were reliving various things that had happened in the room so far to me and others that had lived here, all of which felt vaguely familiar because they'd taken place in my life, but since I was an egoless being, I didn't connect them to my personal life. I felt that I was able to see them in a completely different light, free of attachments and judgments. It was undoubtedly therapeutic. I walked into the backyard after this and revisited the plant spirits outside. I'd had an experience a couple of weeks before where I'd taken 1.5 grams of the same mushrooms and had felt all of the plant's personalities. There was one tree that looked like a popsicle, and it was pretty huge. I felt like this tree was almost condescending and didn't really like humans that much. There was another plant with jagged leaves that seemed very feminine and stylish. I picked up on an ambivalent attitude from this plant. Another tree was one in which I had climbed in the past to save my partner's cat, and he greeted me with recognition and approval. All throughout this time, I kept smoking bowls with copy and weed mixed together. Those empty space visuals never went away. It seemed like this time they were often chest-themed. There were some bowling pins included in there too, for whatever reason. There were mainly pawns and queens and horses and other chess pieces folding and breaking into pieces and coming towards me everywhere I turned. I found this to be fascinating, and if I moved my eyes in certain ways, I could control the ways in which they broke into pieces and the patterns they made on the way over to me. I liked the way it felt when they came down above my head and landed on either side of me. It felt like they were saying hello and giving me presents. The perfectly blissful feeling of exploring the hyperspace version of the territory I was usually so familiar with and appreciating everything about existence persisted for me, and I couldn't have possibly been happier to be right where I was in the moment. I went inside and loaded up another bowl of weed, plus copy, plus DMT, and then went back outside to the side of the house and sat on a concrete block in the yard. It had been more than half an hour since the last time I had DMT, as I like to wait at least 30 minutes between DMT voyages when I'm already tripping on something else, or at all, for that matter, but I tend to only use DMT on top of other psychedelics nowadays. Because I'd already smoked a couple bowls of copy prior to this, I got started on the bowl with the DMT right away. Like the last time, it came on very strongly with a relatively small amount, but this time I experienced an entirely different emotional effect. Suddenly, an intense fear was struck into me. It was like 1 second I felt totally relaxed and blissful, and the next second I was dealing with a deep-rooted fear whose origin was unknown to me. The first thing I noticed was the ground and how I could see everything decaying and turning into other things. It was as if I was concentrating on how different animals and organic materials had absorbed into the dirt and grass and decayed, and then the particles that made those up recycled themselves into other things. I felt as if I was watching this cycle of death and rebirth and became hyper-aware of all of the things that had died and decomposed and then been recycled into new materials and new life in this very yard. However, the random fears seemed very urgent. It seemed like somebody was trying to tell me something important. I noticed that a certain triangular part of the grass a little bit in front of me to the left was much brighter than the rest of the yard. It wasn't actually, but that's what I saw. I understood that this triangular section of the yard was apparently a danger zone, and I felt that some entity was warning me that there were negative spirits there, and I had to be extra careful and aware to not allow the negativity into my own psyche. At the time, I wasn't sure what to make of this, and still am not sure to this day. I don't necessarily believe in spirits or DMT entities as being apart from my consciousness. I don't have any beliefs when it comes to this sort of thing. I keep an open mind to all possibilities, but at the time, the fear made it seem so real to me that I tried to listen to the entity that had just communicated to me to be careful. And I stayed aware and alert so as to not let in this negative energy that was threatening me in the danger zone. This fear gradually dissipated, and I once again felt blessed and left with the same blissful and transcendent tryptamine feeling I'd had throughout the entire experience up until that random fearful moment. During the moments where I felt fearful, it didn't actually bother me very much. I took the fear for what it was and didn't make it into anything else. Fear is just an emotion. I knew somewhere within myself that I didn't actually have anything to fear. I just wondered, and still do, what this meant or whether I might be able to think of any metaphorical interpretations to what I experienced in the yard. After I came down from the DMT, I was still seeing plenty of OEVs and still seeing the objects forming out of empty space and tumbling towards me. I thank the universe and the plant spirits for these presents. I decided to take a walk to the park down the street. The leaves were just beginning to change as my favorite season, autumn, was starting. The leaves delighted me and walking felt interesting. It was like I was hovering a few inches off the ground. When I got to the park, I passed some people and could feel all of their energies very intensely. I got the sense that most of these people didn't really look too deeply into life, which felt like a shame to me, but I supposed that everyone was just who they were meant to be all the same. It was incredibly interesting being at the park watching people, and I felt like I could hear things and make out words being said from far away. This happens to me a lot on copy where I experience these heightened sensory abilities. I felt like a fly on the wall in the distance, a spy, almost. That's how clear things were that people were saying from far away. I had begun to get very tired by this point, as it was almost 6 hours after I had drank the tea. I sat down on a log in the park somewhere and put my head down and just tranced out in a half-trippy, half-sleepy state of mind. I stayed here for another 20 minutes or so, then began to walk back home. As soon as I got home, feeling refreshed from the nice afterglow, I jumped into bed and fell into a deeper than usual sleep rather quickly. Because copy is a REMA MAOI and doesn't last very long, and on top of that, my route of administration was smoking, I experienced no negative side effects such as nausea or stomach discomfort and did not have to watch my diet. I felt that the copy made the mushroom trip much more visual than I'd ever experienced mushrooms to be before, and I felt much more spiritually ecstatic than usual throughout the entire experience. I also felt much more dreamlike. Smoked copy seems to work wonders with mushrooms and DMT. Terrence McKenna was definitely onto something when he suggested smoking copy leaves on top of mushrooms. I'm going to have to explore this combination furthermore. I have had a small amount of DMT that I have kept around for quite a while now, probably a year now, which I got from a very reliable friend who managed to procure it online. I have been interested in having this experience for a long time, and I felt like I had done enough personal research to know, at least somewhat, what I could expect. I have been a long-time fan and listener of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and have heard Joe as well as multiple guests talk about their positive, mind-altering, perspective-shifting experiences with this obscure, mystical, and intriguing drug. I had also seen the Rick Strassman documentary The Spirit Molecule several times in recent years and had been interested in having a visionary experience of my own. I wanted my first experience to be with ayahuasca, perhaps in the native setting in the Amazon, with a shaman, but I grew impatient and decided it was time to just take the plunge and try smoking the DMT I already had sitting in my medicine cabinet for so long. I would say that I have had enough psychedelic experiences in my life, both positive and negative, with many different substances, including multiple trips using psilocybin and LSD, that I can say I'm an experienced psychonaut. However, nothing I've ever felt could have prepared me for this. Because of the implications and stories I had heard, as well as my last experience with LSD, I was afraid of it for a long time. Hence why I had it sitting around for so long. Probably spurred by my most recent LSD trip, which to say the least was not a positive experience, but that's for a whole other story. The important thing is, during that ill-fated trip I went to a place where I never, ever wanted to go again. My friend had told me I needed to vaporize it with a torch and an oil pipe way back when I first got it from him, and being that I have never used meth or smoked crack, I had to go out and get one. So on a Tuesday evening after a long day at work, I went to a local gas station where I knew they would sell oil pipes, and got myself the pipe and a small disposable torch lighter, which was embarrassing to say the least, haha, and then went home to prepare. At this point, I should mention that I have a prescription for Adderall which I take intermittently for work, and had taken 30 milligrams earlier that day, probably about 6 hours before the experience. This may have had an effect on the experience, but I can't be sure. Suffice to say I did not think about it being an issue. I had heard many stories, and almost all of the good ones were people who said that they had a good friend or friends around to help them through the experience. I wished so badly in retrospect that I had heeded the advice of the countless travelers who had come before me. The problem was I couldn't ask my roommate because he's not into this sort of thing, and every friend who I had broached the subject with seemed uncomfortable with the idea. So being the fearless, adventurous type that I am, I read a few accounts online for a bit about people trying it by themselves. And after a little while I decided that it'd be okay to try by myself. Big mistake. My friend also told me that the yellow crystalline powder he had wrapped up in a tiny square of tin foil was about enough for 4 doses, so I went by that estimation and sectioned out about 1/4 of the amount I had and scooped it into the pipe using a small nail file. I made my bed and propped up some pillows, then I put on a YouTube video of some binaural beats accompanied by ambient music and visualization graphics, which I thought would be cool and trippy to go along with the DMT. These binaural beats use different frequencies played under soft music and are meant to induce deep relaxation and meditation by forcing your brain into oscillating theta waves. I was feeling calm and relaxed, albeit I could have possibly still been a little stressed from the long day at work. I turned down the lights and set a small candle, unlit, that had a glass container where I was planning on putting the pipe as soon as I exhaled, as I had heard the effects were so fast that often you forget the thing you're holding is a hot piece of glass. Session 1, 10:05 p.m. April 28, 2015. I sat with my back propped up on the pillows I had arranged along the headboard and put the glass candle in front of me, then sparked the torch. I had never smoked out of an oil pipe before, so it was a bit confusing at first. I fumbled with the torch a bit, but managed to get a few small rips and held them in for just a second each, and immediately tasted the awful metallic, plastic-like vapor as I exhaled and heard what I can only describe as the sound a transformer makes when morphing states and changing. It was loud and shrill and seemed to be coming from inside my skull, not like, in my mind, but literally resonating from the base of my neck and reverberating inside the walls of my skull. My vision changed, got darker, and seemed to condense and contort in a perfectly symmetrical way. Like space bending in the center, and I remember putting down the pipe and trying to focus on the trippy visualizations on the screen. At this point, I could still tell I was in my room and was aware of everything around me, my whole room being warped, and then the vibration started. Low at first, then louder, vibrating, resonating, oscillation as if space-time were sound waves coming out of a subwoofer, but the speaker was me. It was coming out my very center, not my body, but my consciousness. At this point, I was still awake and aware of my surroundings, so I decided before it was all gone and wasted, I should try to take another, fuller hit. I had heard from many testimonials, the true experience feels like you break through and you go, just elsewhere. Still in a warped daze, I hurriedly unfolded the foil and dosed out about a third of what was left in the foil, wrapped it back up and set it aside. Then I sparked the torch and ripped it again, hard as fuck this time, and then held in the vapor as long as I could. Before I could even exhale, I felt and heard a deafening loud pop and sizzle, like one of those old photographic flash bulbs, followed immediately by a mechanical whoosh sound. In an instant, my vision warped into what I can only describe as a tunnel of fractal light and sound as my entire consciousness and physical form imploded and was sucked into a black hole the size of a pin. I could feel my form exploding and being ripped away atom by atom as I was rocketed backwards across the universe, across infinite space as brightly lit as the sun. It was like that feeling you get at the top of a sky-high roller coaster as you teeter off the edge and plunge into the abyss, only it was backwards, faster than light. Curving and undulating into infinite, Escher-like loops of this one, singular, infinite moment. I immediately felt pure terror and realized I had taken too much, and there was no stopping it now. I was rocketing toward the empty, dark void I somehow knew was fast approaching behind me. I think at this point I must have started screaming, but my voice was absorbed into the whirring mechanical banging of the deafening sound all around me, coursing through me. It sounded like in the movie The Matrix when Neo gets his whole body consumed by the metallic liquid and his screen turns into warbled nothingness. I could see things, images in the blur as I continued to fall and fall deeper. I remember yelling, "What the F?" But my voice was still cut down by the broken warbled sound as it stuttered off, disappearing into the void. The images and forms were distorted, escaping description, but still infinitely amazing. But because I was facing backwards, I could only see what had already passed. There were snippets from my life, visions of things I had done, people I've hurt, and regretful decisions I've made, but it was all simultaneous, like a feeling of pure dark energy, like concentrated darkness. It was a morphing cloud-like entity that seemed to be aware of me and part of me at the same time. I can only describe it as being made up of all the worst parts of myself, the worst experiences I've ever felt, the darkest emotions. However, this thing was aware and it spoke to me, not in English, but I could understand its meaning. It showed me over and over again all the mistakes I've ever made, and I was convinced of its intent. It wanted to keep me there, locked in this infinite dark loop of time. Forever being ripped apart and reassembled and falling endlessly. All the while being shown my own sins on a never-ending feedback loop of static torment. This darkened, morphing, infinite construct was a prison of my own making. I could hear, or maybe more like feel, 1,000 different, distinct voices all around me screaming, not saying, but screaming my name over and over again all around me, through me. And I knew that I had put myself into this place for the rest of time. This was my punishment for coming to this place unprepared, for trying to understand what I had no hope of comprehending until the universe had decided it was my time to die. Then the voices all around me shifted from 1,000 into 100, then 20, then just one voice yelling my name. The shrill mechanical banging turned into a knock at the door. I stumbled up and felt a sharp pain in my face and all over, my side, my arms. I felt hot blood pouring down from the bridge of my nose. My room was in shambles. I found the light switch and finally opened the door to my roommate, who had been outside the door shouting my name, banging as hard as he could, afraid to come in. I remember telling him I was okay after I opened the door and I just needed a second. He was like, "Did you take some shit?" I nodded as I reached for the bathroom light and steadied myself as I observed the damage in the mirror. My face was fucked. I had hit it on the edge of the bed, or the desk, probably scraped it along the carpet quite a bit because there is a wicked purple and red rug burn across my face. The bridge of my nose looked like it had been smashed against the edge of something sharp. My body was sore all over, countless scrapes across my arms and shins, and a huge bruise on my hip. My head, which I must have banged several times, felt like a mass of throbbing lumps and still vibrated with the mechanical oscillation. I felt as if my body was a hologram and the image was still static, not yet fully manifested. As I staggered out into the kitchen, he followed me wide-eyed and frantic, asking me what was going on, shouting. I ran to the kitchen sink and started splashing cold water on my face, and I realized my roommate was holding a small kitchen knife, frightened. I asked him in an obviously scared and confused voice why he had a weapon, and could he please put it down. He said that he heard me screaming, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" over and over, loud banging and crashing noises coming from my room. He threw the knife into a drawer and offered me some water before I started to try to explain. After a few minutes of frantic explanation of what had just happened, he finally told me why he had been holding the knife. He said he was scared because my screaming was replaced by a deep, demonic voice he swore did not belong to me. His exact words were, "It sounded like the devil." I feel as if I know now what lies on the other side. Although the experience still frightens me, I am happy I had it, even though it was singularly the most utterly terrifying thing I've ever felt. I feel now as though I've been given a second chance at this reality, this consciousness, and these series of moments we call life. Now that I know, the next time I go back to that place, I will be prepared. I am certain that DMT has changed me for the better. My previous health problems. A few years ago, I got very ill for no apparent reason. While no diagnosis was able to be given at the time as tests all came up normal, I was later told by my psychologist that I had probably had chronic fatigue syndrome/ME. The illness came on when I had been veggie for 6 months and gave up oral antibiotics for acne after a period of over a decade, and the only other possible factors could be that I caught a nasty food poisoning/virus thing off my girlfriend and her friends, and possibly was under stress, though no more so than at other periods in my life. Whatever the cause, I got abnormally skinny and pale, constantly fatigued, stomach pains, etc., needed abnormal amounts of sleep but never felt refreshed, felt mentally slow, and eventually got to a point where I was having dizzy spells and felt like my soul was being ripped from my body to an inch to the right during a nauseous period I would have at the same time every afternoon. At this point, I felt I must make the choice between eating meat again or suicide. I opted for meat, and whether coincidence or not, my health gradually improved over the next 6 months. However, I never got back to the same level of energy that I had before falling ill, and this made me understandably sad and lackluster, which is why I started seeing a psychologist. Psychology was helpful, but in all honesty it only helped me to accept my fate, because I never regained the energy and enthusiasm for life that I once felt. Cactus helped stop binge drinking. We're nearly getting to the DMT bit. I needed to stop binge drinking, which I had been doing since the age of 13 at least once a week, a few years before 3 times a week. Alcohol was definitely enjoyable escapism, as well as being used to counteract shyness when young. My hangovers now took 2 or 3 days, and on the first day I would do absolutely nothing, not even get out of bed. Discovering Peruvian Torch helped me curb my drinking, because by taking 5 grams when I went out, I lost that hunger to continue pouring booze down my throat. This was my first step towards healing. Buying the book Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy was my second and somehow helped me far more than the psychologist did. Experimenting with ayahuasca analog. I then heard about ayahuasca and tried M. hostilis with Rue. I had an amazing visionary first time that left me walking on air for the rest of the week. However, the next time I got a real mental pounding from the Rue and couldn't get enough of the light down and had a horrible experience that was in no way helpful whatsoever. I was already aware of the problems that surfaced and felt depressed for days afterwards. Without the light, the purge was a really nasty experience too. DMT to the rescue. I suspected that it was the power, MAOI, that I didn't need, just the light, so I decided to try smoking DMT instead. I was spot on. It's as if DMT and I were made for each other. After 3 years, I feel energy and enthusiasm again. I'm so happy, and I have decided that I shall be smoking DMT weekly for the rest of my life. As well as these physical/psychological effects, depending on what's actually happened in my brain. When I'm out, I have no desire whatsoever to get drunk anymore. In fact, I actually specifically don't want to drink too much. DMT also satisfies my spiritual curiosity as if it were filling the hole left inside me by my atheism. I feel loved. If that makes any sense, I almost feel like I'm in love. It's a similar feeling. Don't worry, I don't feel in any danger of being addicted, if such a thing is possible. Conjecture on DMT as a medicine. Not much is known about CFS/me. It's a syndrome that seems to have emerged with my generation. I'm 30. It was originally called me because they thought it was caused by brain swelling. That theory is no longer in favor, and its name changed to chronic fatigue syndrome, but they call it chronic fatigue syndrome/ME still because sufferers are keen to keep the physical connotations of the ME label in defense of unsympathetic people who think sufferers are just lazy. A recent theory is that a virus is caught which causes mild brain damage in the relevant areas of the brain, such that while the patient has recovered entirely from the virus, the brain still believes and acts as if the patient is still ill, hence the fatigue, inactivity, and excess sleep. Extreme sufferers even feel debilitating pain and muscle aches, but fortunately I didn't suffer that badly. So I think it's interesting that people attest that DMT cures them of headaches and distracts them from pain. For me, I feel like it has lifted the trick that my brain, physically damaged or not, was playing on me. I will let you know if my current situation changes, but I don't feel like it will. I feel right again. Hope this tale is of value. January 28th, 2008. It has now been over 9 weeks since I first smoked DMT, and I've been happy the whole way through. It's about 3 months since I first drank analog. I have never been this happy and emotionally healthy in my entire life. Recently, I didn't smoke it for 3 weeks and still felt fine, although was starting to become a bit more negative again. I expect that eventually I won't need it at all, it having taught me to be optimistic, inspired, and motivated again. My first experience with DMT was extremely intense, extremely bad, and absolutely the most excruciating horror of my life. And that doesn't even begin to describe it. I am very spiritually enlightened, in touch with my chakras, and have vast medical knowledge and awareness of the body, and of my spiritual body/third eye, which may have affected my experience. I was out of town with my husband, visiting friends, and I was having a great weekend. I had known on this trip that I would be doing DMT, but didn't do much research on it. Oh wait, I watched 2 YouTube videos of morons talking about mechanical elves. Little did they mention leaving all forms of fucking reality. I was totally unprepared for what occurred. I was skeptical that it would even do anything because I have done so much LSD and mushrooms and had yet to have an intense visual experience. I do smoke pot often and have for over a decade, but I'm not a wake and bake type of smoker. The night before we did the DMT, my husband, his friends, and I partied hard. So this could be taken into consideration. We had smoked 7 bowls of ultra premium grade 2B hits and 2 shots of Patron tequila and a THC chocolate chip cookie. Oh, and I was also drinking mead. That night I hardly slept and was constantly awakening to what I thought were demonic spirits in my room, only later to discover that the house was indeed haunted, but I also knew I had never been that blown in my life, so I threw it up to being high. I normally see spirits, so this wasn't unusual, only that they felt menacing and that they didn't want me in their house. The next day was the day we all were planning on doing DMT for the very first time. I woke up the day of I still felt high even though we weren't smoking anything that day because we wanted to try DMT clean. However, I felt high up until the very point I smoked DMT. I had 2 experiences with DMT. Since this was all our first times doing DMT, we decided to do a trial run. Since we were going to be smoking it, a glass pipe was needed, but flame could not directly hit the DMT. So, my husband and his best friend rigged an aqua globe, the plant waterer things, and drilled a hole in the top of the globe, and with a funnel, poured the DMT into the glass aqua globe. We dipped the glass mouthpiece in silicone to prevent cuts. The DMT was divided out into carefully measured parts. We started with 30 milligrams of DMT. We smoked it in a glass pipe we bought for this. All 3 of them smoked it and said that it tasted terrible like burnt plastic, but that it felt good and clean, that things felt amplified. So I thought, okay, here it goes. I smoked my first hit of DMT, which as we had studied wouldn't take us away from our bodies. The physical buzz of smoking this drug is extremely similar to a full body buzz of doing nitrous. Then to my amazement I saw for the first time in my life visuals. My husband's face began morphing into a silly putty face, and every movement, every sound wave created the most beautiful visuals, lines, fractals, waves everywhere, rainbows so beautiful. I was so taken back by the intensity of the beautiful visuals I was witnessing here in the living room of our friend's house. It was so intense just this one trip. While I was going through it, I thought to myself, I am not doing the full amount. Within 3 minutes, I was not seeing visuals and was nearly sober but experiencing the body buzz. Within 30 minutes, I had decided to go through with the full-blown amount. We took an hour between hits so that we could come down mildly between the hits. Maybe this accounted for the fact that I had the type of trip that I had. I had an extremely intense trip on my first try on 30 milligrams. My second hit of DMT was 60 milligrams. I was the fourth in the group of friends that took the 60 milligrams hit. When I watched the other three take it, it was apparent that they each left their bodies and that they were at peace. After they came back, they stated that it was the most intense experience of their life, that they saw visuals, but it was a very happy, peaceful experience. I was leery, but decided to buck up and do it. Puff, 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 everyone kept on saying, "Don't fight it, let go," and what they are really saying is let go of your reality and body. I was terrified. I take the final hit that sent me to hyperspace. I felt the feeling that I get over the top hill on the roller coaster, that gut feeling of OMG, I can't handle this G-force. Except that feeling didn't go away like it does on a roller coaster. I realized that I was completely detached from my body. I wasn't in a room, on a couch, in a house, on Earth. I didn't recognize anything around me from this universe. I saw fractals, geometric patterns, psychedelic imagery all around me. Space and time didn't exist. And I realized that this was the space in between the spaces. The code behind the matrix. The stuff that everything is made of. And that is when the chaos sent me into hysterics. Suddenly, I began feeling deep-rooted emotional terror and feelings of low self-esteem and rejection from my childhood. I was abused in my childhood. I felt as though time did not exist, and I had no idea how to get back to my body. I tried physically to come back, and I did once or twice. I remembered opening my eyes trying to reach out to my husband who saw me struggling, but I got sucked back to DMT land. I remember not having a sensation of having a body, but the experience of having conscious thought. I remember seeing the horror of the familiarness of not being in reality, seeing fractals in chaos, and the feelings of utter degradation of self, the power of feeling worthless in the eyes of everything. I can understand how people can experience this and say that they saw God. It is absolutely mind-fucking. How can I explain not being in reality? 3D reality? At one point during the trip, I began recognizing images, or I began putting together images into 3D objects I could recognize, like finding shapes in clouds. I began witnessing scenes that were familiar, like the scene from Dumbo with the pink elephants on parade, and seeing trippy psychedelic posters from the 60s. It was as though the images were mocking me, laughing at my horror. I felt like I was in a Pink Floyd album. As I came back, I remember being utterly terrified from the experience. As I felt my body, I got up from the couch and ran outdoors, trying to get away from the living room, the place where I experienced the worst livid horror of my life. My trip was very bad because of all the trauma I relived during my DMT trip. I wish I could recall interesting images to recall to you, but I can't remember the images, but I remember the feelings. I felt so much anguish and horror and terror and bad things. I think maybe DMT brings the worst emotions out of some people. I've had a very hard life, and I've had to push a lot of bad emotions down to deal with the real world. Maybe DMT brings out what I refuse to acknowledge. DMT pops me out of third-dimensional reality. I'm not even experiencing what I would experience in an out-of-body experience or when I die. I would know I have had an outer-body experience before. This was another realm completely. It's an inner knowing that we all feel after experiencing it, that it is somehow the way things really are behind the curtain. To this day, I have no idea why I had a bad trip. I was nervous about it, and the experience was the most intense experience of my life, but still so were the other people. There are parts of my trip that I know I experienced, but am not able to remember. I can only remember the trippy fractals, even though I know I experienced reliving childhood trauma to some extent. And the worst part of it is time does not exist, so it goes on forever and ever and ever. Regardless of this experience, I am determined to do it again. I think, now that I know what to experience, I will not freak out. But it could happen, and I am open to that too. No one could have prepared me to feel what not feeling reality feels like. But after doing DMT, LSD is like child's candy. At least on LSD and shrooms, I realize that I'm still in a room on planet Earth, that I have fingers even though they may appear 3 feet long and glowing. DMT takes me to a place that is the center of all of creation. The chaos that was there before God created matter. DMT shows me a place that only the gods know about. I feel blessed to have had this experience, though it was an extremely bad trip. I am determined to try it again. It has forever changed me. It is a life-changing event. Know the good, the bad, and the ugly of DMT before you do it. The day after the DMT was taken, I felt very carefree and had an overall slight body buzz. This lasted for 2 to 3 days after the DMT. Within the 7 days since taking DMT, I have smoked marijuana twice and ingested it once. The first time I smoked since DMT, I had the hardest high since I was a teenager. On day 7, I ate a brownie and literally tripped like on LSD, minor visuals, and everything else. I made the brownies so I know what was in it. I am curious to the effects that DMT leads with other mind-altering substances. My spiritual/psychic gifts have increased slightly since doing DMT. The next day after doing DMT, I felt cold ice chills shooting straight into my pineal gland. 17 days later, still experiencing cold ice sensation at top of my head. My personality has changed in a dramatic way since doing DMT. I can't take any crap from anyone, which can be a good or bad thing. I used to not say anything when I felt I was being wronged or whatever, but now I speak immediately without even thinking, without even curbing what comes out of my mouth. This nearly got me in trouble today as my boss handed me a schedule and I started bitching about it, which is something I've never ever done before. Again, it's a good trait to not care what others think about you, but in the workplace and the real world it is going to be a challenge to control. All my life I gave a damn about what others thought, but after doing DMT none of that matters anymore. Ultimately, DMT has changed my life forever. And only those who have journeyed with it can truly understand how I feel.